Hello everyone, welcome. I'm glad you've joined me today. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Jessica Mcilveen, founder of Kids Yoga Therapy, and we've been conducting some interviews over the last couple of months with, I guess, one clear intention, or my intention has been very clear from the start, and it has been to, I guess, bring in new perspectives on all things related to special needs and trauma, and how we can work to heal the impacts of trauma within our children and adults as well. And I really wanted to be able to bring new language to the experiences of children and the sensations that they feel. Often, if we don't understand what they are experiencing or have a little bit of an understanding, which requires the language, then we actually don't know what they need. And if we don't know what they need, then we actually can't help them to heal and move beyond the impacts of what they're experiencing. So that's my intention with all of the interviews I'm conducting. And today I have the amazing Edwina Kempe, and she's going to be discussing trauma-sensitive yoga with us. Now, Edwina is an accredited mental health social worker. She is also a trauma sensitive yoga facilitator and trainer with the Centre for Trauma and Embodiment in Massachusetts. And she's based here in Brisbane, so in Sanford and Paddington. And I really wanted Edwina to be able to shed some light on the trauma-sensitive yoga. Now, she'll explain more about that, but I think it's really important for us to understand how yoga can assist with trauma. And this is for you as well as the parent, as the adult, because often if we've experienced trauma in our own world, unfortunately that's impacting our children, and it can actually end up being the same impacts for them, even though they may not have experienced the trauma themselves. So welcome, Edwina. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I gave a brief intro, but I'd love for you to share yourself. So a little bit about yourself and how you came into this wonderful work.
Yeah, thank you. So I have been working as a social worker and in the community sector for a number of years. And during that time, I completed my yoga teacher training, which changed my life personally and professionally, in that I wanted to try and make yoga more accessible to people that I was working with in social work, and often people that have experienced a lot of trauma in their backgrounds. So I wanted to try and find a way to make yoga safer and more accessible to people that have experienced trauma. And that led me to find the Trauma Centre in Boston, and the work of David Emerson and Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who collaborated to develop Trauma Centre trauma-sensitive yoga, which is the model of yoga that I've gone in to train and specialise in, which has kind of a body of research behind it. So it's a particular model of trauma-sensitive yoga that does have a research and an evidence base. There's lots of kind of variants and different approaches to trauma-sensitive yoga, but this is one particular approach that I've specialised in as an evidence-based model.
Mm-hmm. And let's clear up what we mean by trauma as well. So for you in the work that you're doing, what do you mean by trauma?
Yeah, great question, because I think often different terms can get conflated and kind of used interchangeably.
That's right.
So for me in this work, when I talk about trauma, often talking about trauma that occurs in the context of relationships. And kind of one way of defining that could be around some kind of threat or perceived threat to life. So it doesn't have to be actually life-threatening, but that the body or the organism of someone perceives that to be a threat.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so often relational trauma is what I'm working with.
Okay. And so that would be when, so people know the person and they've felt a threat, they've felt that they're in danger, they've felt that they needed to protect themselves against a particular person that they know and that they have a current relationship with.
Yeah, yeah. So it could be a child and a caregiver, or it could be spouses, for example, or siblings.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. And so what types of, you're working with adults at the moment. So what adults, what are they coming to you for, Edwina? What do you commonly see within the work that you're doing?
I think people are often finding me and the kind of work that I do because they have um, a long history of uh, working with their trauma or their history in a kind of talk-based way. So they might have engaged with quite a lot of therapy or counselling or done a lot of processes around talking about what's happened to them. And they have come to a point of feeling like there's something missing and there's something that's not being addressed in that space. And so they're kind of identifying often for themselves that it feels like the body is something that they want to be exploring or coming to notice or have a relationship with, and that has been a gap in their story so far.
Yeah, sure. And that would mean then that they have realised there's a huge disconnect with their body, right? So that the impacts of their trauma has been that they've disassociated, they've disconnected from their body because that's the area of fear for them. That's the area that they're scared of. So what's different between your yoga classes and sessions and the trauma sensitive yoga compared to a regular yoga class?
So there's a huge focus on the creation of safety. Like you mentioned, fear, and that there can be such a disconnect and a fear around what might come up through doing some body work. So the creation of I guess, a cautious and kind of safe space where people can come to feel like in their own time, at their own pace, they can come to interact with their body and what they might be noticing or experiencing in their body. So there's lots of choice available to people, so they can do as much or as little as they like, and really participate in any way that feels useful to them. So a lot of the direction and instruction that can be present in other yoga styles is taken out, so that people are in charge of their own experience and in charge of how they move their body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Feel safe to them.
Yeah. And language is a huge part of that, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a like the training to become a trauma sensitive yoga facilitator is 7 months, and it is really focused on language, and so that practitioners and facilitators are really mindful of how language can support people to access the practice safely and without judgment, and without kind of a subjective kind of assumption of what that experience should be, allowing it to be whatever it is for the person.
Yeah. And I know that I've done a brief session with Edwina at a workshop, and I know that when I did your session, I believe it was because there was so much choice, and because of the language that you used, I felt I had complete control over my body and complete control over the choices that I could make. Do I want to do this or do I not want to do this? And I felt so much more relaxed at the end, simply because there was nothing being forced, and I think it is that sense of control. And so I imagine, as somebody that has experienced quite significant trauma in their life, that the language is really crucial. It's really important, and that creates the safe space for them that you've explained.
Yeah.
Really beautiful.
Absolutely, and I think that that theme of choice is really significant in this space because choice has been taken away from people in the context of trauma. They haven't had control over how their body has responded. Hasn't been a choice that they've been able to kind of control the response that their body took, as well as the choice that's taken away in relationships where power is abused. So choice is really important.
Yeah. And for, I guess, what benefits have you seen, Edwina, or what do you consistently see within your clients that really gives you a clear indication that this work is worthwhile and beneficial?
I think a range of things, and it's different for everyone. And it's also not a one size fits all as well. So what might be working in some way for someone might not be working for other people. But some of the themes are around this connection to the body and coming to some of the words that might be used to like re-inhabit the body or reconnect to the body. To come to feel the body as my own, to come to live in the body again. Another theme is around that of choice and an experience of being in control of what someone might be experiencing in their body and knowing that they can change their body experience, that they have that sort of agency and choice in their own sort of just in this moment of a yoga practice to be able to choose and control over what their experience is. People do talk about having a sense of calm and a sense of relaxation, but we don't see that as a goal in itself. It might be an outcome for people, but it could also be that sometimes the practice is not calming, and it's about noticing that if it's not, and that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. That's a really good point, isn't it? Because when we're doing these moves and actually starting to take notice of our body, a lot of things can start coming up for these people. So in that space, Edwina, what have you seen? What comes up for people that can be quite scary for them when they start to take notice of their body, which they haven't done in such a long time?
Yeah, again, a range of things. It could be that emotions come up. Some people find that they cry, or they might have memories come up, or sort of flashback type experiences that might come up. Or it might be that sensations themselves in the body can be quite intense, and people can choose to either stay with that sensation if that feels useful to them, or they can choose to move out of that sensation and move out of the form if it doesn't feel useful to be there with that sensation or that experience. And I guess, yeah, it is the nature of trauma and the way that it is stored in the body that it is quite possible that those kinds of responses will happen for people when engaging with their bodies. And we want to try and create a space where that's okay and it's safe for that to happen. So I'm generally working with people who have access to mental health support, whether that's a counsellor or a psychologist or a GP, where they can access support in a talk-based way outside of the yoga space.
Yeah. Why is it so important that we do reconnect with our bodies if we haven't? Why do we need to do that?
Again, I'm going to say that that's individual for everyone, but I think a connection to our bodies can support us to be more present in our lives and in each moment. some of the research participants in this model of yoga, there's some beautiful stories of their experience. And if people are interested in the research, that's all available online if that's interesting to look at. But one story that stands out for me is a woman describing that when she went to the beach, the only way that she kind of knew she was there was to look behind her and see her footprints in the sand. So she couldn't really feel the sand on her feet, and she couldn't feel the sun on her skin or the wind in her hair. And it was a yoga practice that supported her to come to be in her body again, so that she could have those experiences of herself and her physical reality in the present moment.
Yeah, wow. And that's just something so simple, right? We take these things for granted. And this is why I'm doing these interviews, because that can be a really foreign concept for people. How can you not feel something on your feet, or how can you not feel the warmth of the sun on your body, or how can you not feel when you've got goosebumps, or when you're hungry as well, right? All of these internal sensations is a really foreign concept. And this is as true for adults as it is for children. This is how it happens for children as well. And it's really important for us to understand that we need to support the reconnection with bodies within trauma, and for special needs as well, if we're to help these children grow into thriving adults and not be impacted lifelong from what they've experienced. But it can be very foreign. That's a foreign concept even to imagine. So that's a nice story. And do you have a client, a previous client that really stands out for you, that you just, they really got control back, or they got what they wanted, and they're living a life that, is so much better than it was before?
Yeah, I think one sort of story comes to mind of someone really coming to be able to trust their body again, which I think speaks to what you were just talking about, of how if we can't trust our bodies, and our bodies are unpredictable or scary, or we're disconnected from the signals that we're getting from our bodies, it can be very hard to function, or hard to kind of live a fulfilled and well sort of feeling life when we're disconnected from that experience. So I think someone that's coming to mind really went on this journey of being able to trust their body again, which had profound impacts for how she was engaging in day-to-day life, as well as in relationships, in being able to tolerate intimacy in relationships better. And so I think this experience of being able to trust the body again.
Yeah. And I guess I'd love for you to share what, parents who are watching, either for themselves or for their children, and quite often, it's as much for us as it is our children, right? We all have healing to do, whether or not we've experienced something extremely significant. We all have a story from our childhood. We all have experiences that have impacted us greatly. And we really do need to work through those with our bodies. So how can we do that from being in our everyday life, or how can we do that at home, Edwina, if we don't have the luxury of coming, and being supported by somebody such as yourself?
Yeah, I think I like how you say that it can be for us as much, or for the adult or the caregiver as much for the child. And I would use similar tools, I think, of small little practices that might support either a parent or a child to be present with what they're experiencing in the moment. So, and I think sometimes yoga can, if someone hasn't experienced yoga, can be daunting or or just feel like it's not some, everyone's kind of thing. But it could be something like maybe feeling the ground under your feet. So you might notice the connection of the ground under your feet. Or maybe if you're sitting, it might be the connection of a chair or a couch under your body, maybe feeling some connection or support from that surface under you. Or it could be a movement with breath. So one that I will often do is like a opening and closing of hands, maybe with breathing. So that could be like opening your hands, and you might breathe in as you open your hands, and you might close your hands and maybe breathe out as you close your hands. Yeah, maybe sort of small things that might support people to be in the moment in their body.
Yeah, perfect. And they're just great examples of how simple it can be, and it is, right? It's just the simple things, but for a traumatized body and mind, they're actually really significant, because they, like that lady that you said, she can't even feel the sand, right? These people don't feel anything, and they don't come back to the present moment ever. So, practicing that is really powerful and a great first step. That's, perfect. Are there any other particular ideas for, I guess, for children? And I know you don't work with children, Edwina, but anything that you can think of that would still work for them? And those three examples definitely would, and I would often use the hand one as well. But anything that you can think of that might work for kids as well?
Yeah, I think one resource is kind of different yoga forms, and sometimes kids will have these in their bodies sort of intuitively or innately anyway, like being a tree, taking a tree form, and maybe feeling your foot to the ground, and maybe some branches to the sky. That kind of play with some of the yoga forms can be fun for kids, and I think sometimes kids already have forms in their bodies. You could think of some animals, and how would they notice that in their body. I guess still in this model we'd still be trying to connect it to the present sort of moment experience of that. So maybe grounding it to what they can feel in their body right now.
Perfect. And I'd love to touch on breath, because that's really, it's an important piece of yoga. It's an important piece of every body practice now, and mental health practices, right? Breath is really important, but breath can also be really scary for these, for people that have experienced trauma. So how do you work with the breath within your framework, Edwina?
We take an approach of, again, it being choice-based. So people might not want to do breath work for the reasons that you've said. It can be triggering or overwhelming to be with the breath. But if someone would like to engage with their breath, we might start with some practices of noticing the breath, just noticing that it's even there. And that could be noticing that you're breathing, or it could be noticing that maybe there's some movement of your breath in your body. So that could be that maybe your chest and your ribs might move when you breathe. So sort of starting with some breath awareness, and maybe what the breath might feel like in the body is where we tend to work with the breath, rather than trying to change the breath in any way or force the breath in any way.
Yeah, sure. And that's very different to yoga classes, right? Regular ones, because we're either counting or we're doing these crazy, Kalabati breaths, or alternate nostril breathing, or where, it's extreme breathing, but that's not really the purpose of trauma sensitive yoga, is it? It's really about giving them choice and coming back to just the present moment, and like you said, just noticing it. So it's very different.
Yeah, I think there's sort of this acknowledgement that because the breath can be triggering, we're not trying to ask people to breathe in a different way, because that might take away some protective mechanism that the way they're breathing is serving some protective function.
Yeah, sure.
So we don't want to take that away too quickly.
Yeah. And I guess with time, right, the more work you do with somebody, then you can start extending the breath and really making sure that it's going down in the belly instead of the chest, and it's a longer exhale, to start really working with the nervous system. I'd imagine that takes time, but it also takes them trusting the experience too.
Yeah, and also that it's okay if it doesn't go there, try and not put the expectation on it that it needs to be done in a certain way for it to be proper breathing, or just noticing could be enough of a practice forever.
Yeah, okay, all right, great. That's good to know, because that really does take a lot of pressure off, right? And that's...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, perfect. So Edwina, is there anything that we haven't covered about trauma sensitive yoga, or anything that you think would be helpful for the people watching this that I haven't asked? Any other tips or maybe resources or anything that you can think of?
I think that this is a nice sort of little nutshell. There are a lot of resources available on traumasensitiveyoga.com. There's different videos and research and books and things. So if people are interested in exploring it for themselves, or if you're interested in finding a trained facilitator in this particular model, they're all listed on that website.
Okay.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to me as well with any questions.
Yeah, perfect. And how would somebody do that, Edwina? What's the best method to contact you?
Probably email. So that's edwinakempe@gmail.com, or my website, edwinakempe.com.
Perfect. Thank you. And so that's and that's just for adults, isn't it, Edwina? So do you do groups and private sessions as well? Is that how you operate?
Yeah, I do. And I do run group sessions for kids for services. So I just don't work one-on-one with kids.
Yeah, okay. All right, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
No worries.
So there you have it, everyone. A really good introduction into trauma sensitive yoga. And so the founders, David Emerson and Bessel van der Kolk, so they're incredible people to look up. And if you've been to my workshops, you'll know that I speak about them a lot, and their information is really important in this line of work. And if you want to discuss more about how this work can help your child, you've got Edwina and myself to contact, and we'd both be more than happy to answer any questions or point you in the right direction of programs and support. So thank you so much for joining me, Edwina. I hope you have a really good Monday.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. See you later.
No worries.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.